just turned October, the best day of the year, and the PS2 just came out with something that can finally scratch those Silent Hill 2 feelings. Except, who am I fooling? This ain't no PS2 game. This is Hollowbody, a brand new indie game that just released on Steam now in 2024. It's been a damn good year for survival horror throwbacks. Between Crow Country, the console release of Elisa, and the upcoming Fear the Spotlight, PS1 horror fans have been eating healthier than ever. But you can't forget how big a home the PS2 also was to horror games. So in the frenzy of all these awesome 90s looking ones, it was incredible to see Hollowbody tackling a look that felt early to mid-2000s. Developed all pretty much by just one single dude. Art, design, sound, programming, writing, and music all by this one man. That is absolutely bananas. I've been following this one for quite a while. Like, the visuals on this thing just looked like they absolutely nailed that mid-poly, pale lighting look. It kind of felt like a horror game on Wii, just way cooler looking. Like, it had way more detail and stuff that you could ever possibly have on the Wii back then. Remember Calling? I actually really love the way that game looks, but it's not exactly a great game. So I've always wanted something that had that graphical feel to it, but played a lot more like, something I actually like. And that's where Hollowbody landed for me. Not only did it offer a really impressive version of those visuals, but it also seemed to be all about the classic survival horror gameplay as well, and that was just way more up my alley. Nathan was kind enough to send over a review code a couple of days before it came out, or is it Nath? I don't know if it's Nath or Nathan. It's Nathan in the credits. He's Nath on Twitter. Buddy who make it a game sent me over a copy shortly before the game came out. I didn't get around to playing it until just recently, and I just finished it for the third time last night. Dude, this was a hard game to put down. This is precisely my kind of video game. And now that I've combed through the whole thing, I've pretty much seen it all, I got a whole lot of thoughts and feelings, even some criticisms bubbling in my brain. So let's do a little ramble video, dump my thoughts into the internet, and I don't know, let you know what I think. The premise here is there was this really corrupt city that was not good to its citizens, and somehow a bioweapon or bio disease or bio something bad broke out there, and being such a corrupt city, very select few high important individuals were the ones who were rescued, leaving everybody else for dead. When you first start the game, you're going through this little prologue that gives you a really good sense of the exploitation that these people are basically suffering through, taking opportunities not because they want to, but because they're forced into it. They're desperate, they have to.
Personally, mine's pretty vanilla. They took my son.
Oh, jeez.
And in the middle of this mess, one of the cleanup workers named Sasha goes missing in that city. We then cut to Mika Holloway, our protagonist, a longtime friend of Sasha, who is entirely fed up with the total lack of effort into trying to rescue Sasha. The organization clearly doesn't care. It's a cold world, so Mika takes it upon herself to enter the city against the will of the company and find Sasha anyway.
You sure you want to do this?
She's still out there, Tax. Somewhere. Scared and alone.
Then we get this wicked cool scene of this flying car. It's kind of like the 60s interpretation of the future. That retro futurism, the monitor dashboard and the graphs and stuff going. And oh my god, the stormy rainy night. What a freaking intro.
We're about 3 miles out from where Sasha was posted. You think you can hold on?
And of course, our super duper flying future car crashes into what's basically a Silent Hill evil biohazard town. Now that we've got ourselves stranded with no real way out, we have to find a high point, hopefully at the top of a building or something, so we can get a signal on our radio to call for reinforcements, and hopefully find Sasha or any other survivors in the process. While the world kind of feels like a combination of the evil corpse that enslaved you from the Alien franchise and the biohazard stuff of Resident Evil, the gameplay and visuals and everything else is very easily inspired the most by Silent Hill 2. Visually too, this really does nail that mid-2000s PlayStation 2 or kind of Nintendo Wii look. This is such an amazing looking thing, just how desaturated it looks. The lighting has almost this flat or matte or whatever the word for it feeling to it. It's very controlled lighting. I remember him saying on Twitter how he was looking at how The Last of Us apparently had really carefully placed lighting. And he was like, oh yeah, I did that too, just carefully pushing shapes, getting that overcast look. I know it was a very careful thing to achieve. You're not going to find any bump mapping in here, no reflections, all that glistening stuff you get from modern games. It really just looks like you're playing a PS2 game, and there's so much more detail than you could have fit in one of those games. Even on the Wii, it's like they really pushed that look and did so much more with it, and I've never really seen a game look like this. I mean, the amount of detail in this game is freaking staggering. The apartment complex immediately early in the game is just so telling of how much work went into this. Every room feels unique, every piece of mold, every dead body looks in such a unique way that tells a story of what their life was before all this happened to them. Every busted up piece of furniture, every little doodad in the room placed with purpose. It's all rubble, but it's placed with purpose, and it really gets across this just like, oh man, there used to be something here and it's all dead now and horrible looking now. Yet it is just so interesting and cool looking that you're just enthralled by it, walking through every hallway, going into every room, and just take it all in as you glaze your flashlight's beam across the environment around you. Now, in the footage you're looking at, I kind of had to fiddle with the graphics options because I played it on Steam Deck before it was Steam Deck compatible, so I was kind of like fiddling with that, going on low, medium, and high, so it's going to fluctuate frame rate and how good the textures look in this video. But let's say you are playing it at the max settings, you know, it's looking the most intended way. It basically feels like a modern HD PS2 game, and it's so surreal looking at like basically what does feel like that, except everything is way clearer and has way more detail. This is the very definition of taking an older art style that existed because of the hardware and actually pushing it forward into new territory that they could not do back then. But just as effective getting across all of those spooky feelings is the sound design, and I cannot believe how good this is. It basically feels like a lower energy, less intense, okay, it feels like a less intense version of a Silent Hill soundtrack. You have the droning, you have the clanging. It all feels so hollow. You know, I guess that's what they're trying to get across, is this sensation of hollowness. I mean, you have this big town that used to be flourishing with life and families all doing stuff and loving and laughing and enjoying, and then it was basically completely gutted into this corpse for this evil organization to take advantage of all the people and just do some other thing, and then that went out of control, and then it's just like this big flooding mess of mold and biohazard stuff. So yeah, hollowness, that makes sense. The ambient sounds in general are so amazing. I don't know how this guy got this good a recording of a thunderstorm, but when you're walking down the streets in the rain, oh man, it's good. And again, all the retro futurism stuff. Another way I sense a little bit of Alien influence, particularly the first one. But like every time you walk into an apartment and you get to see what the TVs look like, maybe you see what their computer or a VCR or just any equipment and devices in general, even telephones. They have these video phones, just classic 60s or like, I don't know, old school interpretation of what the future is going to look like where it's still all bulky. They nail that so well here, and it does help make it feel really unique from the things it's taking inspiration from. Nothing takes the cake like the pause menus, though. Look at this stuff. Is this not the single sickest survival horror menu you've ever seen, dude? Oh my god! Like, the footage of the eye back there with all the, like, the filters and color grading and the glitchy effects. You got the little map up there, your condition. Oh, it feels so classic, so new, so polished, so... Oh, I've never seen nothing like this! Oh my god, this is so like it's wicked sick. And when you go on the items, it looks like this. It's so cool. Freaking delicious. On this menu, you got all your weapons, your supplies, you know, healing stuff, and your key items. Really not much for healing stuff. There's just the one thing. So key items obviously means there's gonna be puzzles, or at least kind of grabbing an item, figuring out where to use it as a key in some maybe simple way, like it is a key, or some obtuse way. Maybe you're like finding a leaking battery and using the acid from it to burn this rusted over lock. You could even combine items. Maybe you're combining a coat hanger with a yo-yo so you can make a little fishing reel thingy. Combining stuff in this game never really feels that unobvious, though. That's kind of what made it special in Silent Hill 2 and 3 is you're combining a horseshoe with a lighter and wax, because like melt the wax, but you put the whole picture in your head, and it's such an unlikely combination of things. But in this game, it's always pretty obvious. You just get the two things really close to each other, and you're like, oh, that goes together, and then you do it. And it's neat that that's in here, but don't expect like Silent Hill 2 levels of like cool puzzles with it. Some of them are pretty cool, though. I really loved how you had to figure out, I need to use that switch somehow. What do we got around here? That felt like me figuring something out myself. Maybe it would have been a bit cooler if the were a little further from it, though. I think that's really what it is the items are a little bit too close to what you have to use them on, so it's just like, and then you're done. So I don't know, that's one thing I think could make this this game a little more challenging puzzle-wise, I guess. I don't know. Oh, I do like that some items you will use multiple times. It's not like, hey, I found a hammer, time to use it on the one thing a hammer will ever be useful for in this survival horror situation. It's like, what are you talking about? I would keep the hammer and use it on more than one thing, right? You use that hammer, you're busting logs, you're busting walls, anything that makes sense to use a hammer, it's still relevant. So I do like that. That is a little less obvious when you have to think to reuse an item that's older and not just what you picked up, so I do really like that a lot. The fuses were cool, because it's like, you get 3. I got 3, but I only used 2. Is there a secret somewhere I missed that uses the third one? I don't know, maybe I'll look for that on my replay. There are a couple of puzzles that are really good, though. I like the candle one in the graveyard a lot. But the most I was impressed by a puzzle in this game was easily the calendar safe puzzle. Well, it's not really a calendar, but you're inferring a date. I've seen so many calendar puzzles in horror games, like Resident Evil 8 even had one, freaking Calling, I brought that up earlier, that has one. And those, it's just such a go-to thing I've seen in a million horror games. And usually it's just as simple as, oh, the date's his birthday. Like Silent Hill Shattered Memories did this. The date's the birthday. Figure out the birthday on a different document. Type that in. You got it. It's usually either just an A or it's an A plus a B, and then you get it. This went 2 steps further than that. And they did it in such a way that there was even a little bit of guesswork, where it's like, you know it's going to be one of 3 numbers because of just context clues, and then you try all 3, and then that's it. And the way they pull that off, with the extra steps and a little bit of just real human guesswork, is it this, is that, that's it. It really got across that feeling of just walking into somebody's home where if it's been dead for so long and you're just picking up the pieces and you actually figure out what that safe was. This is the most a horror game has ever sold me on that sensation. So, that was really freaking cool. So yeah, the puzzles are here and there, I guess. Some are really, really cool. Some are pretty fun, and there's some that I think are a little bit too simple, but overall, I did like them. So of course, this game's got tank controls and fixed angles. When I played the demo earlier this year, they didn't have tank controls, but so many people asked for it that Nathan actually put them in there. Yo, that was awesome of you, because that's how I played my entire first playthrough, was with the tank controls. That's just how I like these games to play. And I do think objectively, the more traditional analog controls are objectively easier to get around enemies and to not get hit and stuff. The utility is far better in those, but if you do want to just play it the classic way, you can, and that's an amazing option. It's just right there in the pause menu too. Just check that box. That's how you got to do it, because not everyone likes tank controls. I do, but a lot of people struggle with them, so just have both. Just do what Silent Hill 2 did, just have both. The analog controls will give you a little bit of that angle change control jitter that I always complain about, like an angry old man crumbling into dust as he whines about video games. But for the record, it is a little bit better than most games I've seen. I mean, it's that thing where you hold the direction and it keeps going. You gotta kind of snap the stick, but I don't know. I feel like the angles don't change so frequently that it's ever a problem. So as for the camera, like the fixed camera stuff, overall the camera's usually behind you tailing, and then you have a button just to recenter it. Very similar to, again, Silent Hill 2, this game's main inspiration. It won't swing around awkwardly though. The camera's a little bit easier to just keep snapping behind you. You just click in the left stick as you're moving, and it's very easy just to have it keep up with you. I think the use of fixed angles is very interesting. So like when you're indoors, there will just be a lot of just general fixed angles just to give you a good look at the apartments around you. But when you're walking around the town, when it's mostly behind you, the fixed angles are kind of a way to illustrate that certain ways are a dead end. Now, the game never tells you exactly that is what that means, but after you walk down a street and you get this fixed angle and you realize there's nothing to do here, and that happens a second time and a third time, you start to pair those two together, and naturally you start to realize, if I get a fixed angle out here, it's giving me a cool view, but that means there's nothing here. So I think that was a really clever use of that, because it gets across, you know, a little bit of direction without just outright telling you. It feels really natural. It's very cool. And I love how they actually utilize these fixed camera angles in order to get across the scares. Yeah, here's the clip of Resident Evil 2 that everybody uses, and I'm using it again just to get across the idea. Yes, it is such a good way to time scares and make sure the player's attention is directed at the right thing so they don't miss it. I remember in Resident Evil 7, the amount of people that missed that scare of Marguerite's creepy long mutant hand grabbing the lantern. So many people miss that because you can just look at whatever, right? So it's interesting when games do that, and Hollowbody does a pretty good job at that. Here's one example when you're walking up the stairs and then this window cracks and your attention is brought to it because the camera's aimed at it for you, and then when you walk away it smashes. Like, that actually got me a little bit. Overall, I would say the game is a little bit more about just the general spooky ambience than it is about in-your-face scares, but there are a couple of scares that are pretty good. As much as I do love these fixed camera angles though, I wish I could just get a closer look at these environments. I wish you could at least go into first-person mode and just look at it all. I just want to be close up and see all of the hard work that was put into this, because again, the detail here, the amount of work put into this is just bananas. But another reason I love the combination of tank controls with these angles is because it allows you just to press left and right on the stick or the D-pad just to wash the flashlight left and right in front of you, looking at each part of the room one by one. I really love doing that with tank controls. Now the combat is where we get a little bit into the weird hybrid tank controls, non-tank controls thing if you're using tank controls. You're not going to notice this if you are just playing with the normal analog stuff, but when you aim and there's an enemy present, like if you just aim normally, you'll still be tank controls, but if you aim and there's an enemy nearby, you'll lock onto it, and then you'll be able to freely move any direction you push the stick. It is a little bit more seamless when you're playing with the analog controls. Again, you can tell Hollowbody was made with the more traditional analog controls in mind, but it does still feel like a cool little transition gameplay movement thing when you get into the combat with tank controls. So of course you got melee and you got ranged, both of which control the same. Just hold down the aim button and press the melee button to swing, or the firearm button to shoot. Identical to a Silent Hill game, auto aim and all. Now the melee is certainly a lot more challenging, as it should be, because you have those, you gotta basically do a lot of timing, and you gotta make sure you're not close to the enemy when they do their attack animation, and the attack animations are like pretty unpredictable. I feel like, I don't know if there's some RNG making it a little sporadic, but I find I have a pretty hard time figuring out when to get in there, because it feels like the way they attack and fumble at you, I could never really get a consistent rhythm to it in a way that I could in Silent Hill. So like that could be a bad thing or a good thing, depending on, like, I guess you do want uncertainty in the combat, yeah, so I'm inclined to say it's a good thing, but I would have liked it a lot more if I had to rely on it a little bit more. It didn't really feel like I had to save my ammo all that much. Like, I just had so much freaking ammo by the end of this game, and I was playing on intended difficulty. I wasn't playing on the easier one. I don't know, I feel like I should have held back with the ammo a little bit just so I couldn't basically take out every single enemy comfortably with it, because the ranged combat is really easy. Let's be real, like the way you can completely free move now and you're not locked to the more restricted movement, and you don't really have to time it as much. You just lock on, make sure you're moving away and mash shoot and you win, and it never really felt like I wasn't able to do that because I always had enough bullets. All the different weapons are really fun to use. You got your usual suspects for the main two, you know, you got your pistol, and then you find the shotgun a little later. But the other two are a little bit less than usual, which I really appreciated. Firstly, there's a bow and arrow, which I didn't even find on my first playthrough. I found this on my second one. You can just find it just by exploring the city. And then you also have to find the arrows in someone's backyard. They have this archery course set up. That's cool. You combine them together and you got a brand new weapon. And the last one is the flamethrower. Now, this thing is like a major headache to get. So it's like a secret weapon. You have to do a ridiculous amount of backtracking. Remember that other fuse? It's like, didn't I see something for that like way before? It takes so long to run all the way back. But I do appreciate that there is like an element of puzzle to it though. Like, not only the fuse thing you have to figure out, you have to figure out an other thing as well. And then you get into this room with the flamethrower. There's a pretty funny note from the guy who left it, which I really appreciated. Really believably working into the world building why there's a flamethrower in this random dude's room. If you take the super mega detour to get this thing, you are invincible for the last third of the game. Basically infinite ammo, really good range. You're just tearing through everything and nothing can stop you. That sounds OP, but you have to do so much annoying crap to get this that I really love it's here. I love that every run you get 2/3 through the game, and then you have the option, do I want to do all that to make the last part of the game way easier, or do I just want to just go forward. That's a cool thing to have in this game. Oh, the last element of the combat I should bring up, just because it is kind of a weird thing, and I didn't even know about it my first 2 playthroughs. I didn't figure this out until my 3rd one, and that makes me wonder, like, how much did this really matter, is the ability to burn bodies after you defeat them. Now, this is an old mechanic that I've always really loved. Resident Evil 1 does it, of course, and Evil Within had a really cool take on it as well. But the reason it was really cool in those games is because it was an expendable resource. You had to decide, like, I can do this to 3 guys right now, which 3 do I choose? And in the case of Evil Within, you could even time it to light a whole bunch of guys on fire. But in this game, it's not exactly a resource. You just have this lighter in your inventory from the very beginning of the game, and you can just use it infinitely. And it's a really simple thing too. Like, every time you just knock a guy down, open the inventory, click use on the lighter, and you ignite the body, then it can't get back up. So I did not know about this my first and second playthrough, because I would just kind of dispatch enemies and I would run away, and if I ever came back and they were up again, I just assumed they were new enemies and I would dispatch them again, and that was never a problem again, because I think ammunition is a little bit too sufficient in this game. But when I did figure this out and I started doing it, it just kind of felt like, yeah, just do the thing every time you beat an enemy, and it's not a hard thing to do, it's not a thing you have to think about, it's just this, like, open the menu and click the buttons every time you beat a guy, and there you go. And it's sure, it's the same mechanic, but it's a lot less interesting when you do it this way. On the flip side, though, you know, this is from the perspective of someone who's played a bajillion games, and I want these games to be challenging, but it doesn't have to be, right? It could be a little bit slacker of an experience. Not everybody wants to deal with the stress and panic and worry of dealing with limited resources, so maybe if you're not really into survival horror games, this might feel like, oh, okay, maybe there's a version of that where it's, like, not as intense, you know? So, you know, I'm not trying to shit all over the game, it's me, for my own personal needs from horror games, it did leave me with a bit to be desired, I guess. One thing I am very thankful they didn't even try to make challenging, though, was the whole escort thing. So this is optional. There's a part where you can save some dude, and then he kind of tags along for part of the game. My brain went right to Maria in Silent Hill 2, and how annoying it is when you're trying to shoot something and she's in the way, and you shoot her by accident, and it's like, oh great, game over, not because I died. This dude is thankfully completely invincible. You'll never have to worry about accidentally shooting him or letting him accidentally die. If anything, he just kind of ends up being this thing that accidentally scares you, because you just turn around, there's a guy there, and you forget that there's just a dude with you. Speaking of difficulty, though, you do unlock a harder difficulty when you beat the game, which had me pretty excited. I still didn't find it the hardest thing in the world. Like, sure, certain parts did give me a decent challenge, especially the subway. I loved how difficult the subway was. But overall, I feel like I still didn't really have to save resources that much. I mean, by the end of the game, I still had a ton of bullets. Let's talk about pacing, because I think the pacing here is really good. It feels like you spend the perfect amount of time in each area, except maybe the last one. I feel like the last area could have been a little bit longer, but I'm not saying anything Nathan doesn't already know. I was talking to Nathan, and he said that he really wanted to put so many more ideas in here, but you know, there's the Kickstarter, and you only have so much budget and so much time, and it's basically ran out of both and had to release the game, is what he was telling me. So I kind of feel awful bringing up criticisms that I'm sure he already knows and wants to do better, but whatever, it is what it is, right? So let's give credit where it's due. Other than the subway, the pacing is perfect. You got the first part where you're going through this town and there's no enemies. It's just an easy, lax way just to get you familiar with the environment, soak in some ambience while getting used to the controls and learning how to play the game. Then you get to the apartment. That's where you start seeing enemies for the first time. I feel like you spend the perfect amount of time there. There's a healthy amount of puzzles. Then it's back to the town, a little more challenging, and then you got your next level, then it's back to the town, and then you got your final thing. Just a good back and forth between basically two different types of environments, and there's a good progression of challenge and I guess like the visuals changing as it gets darker, I guess as the night goes on too. I guess I do wish there was a little bit more to the town exploration. You know, don't expect to find as many hidden items or as many unique buildings as a Silent Hill game. It is just the one guy making it. But they are still these great moody changes in pace where you get to take in all the wreckage around you, and you even get to go inside some of the houses at the point, and that was something I thought was sorely lacking in Silent Hill 2, so that was very cool. That subway area was my favorite spot though, I do have to admit. A big part of it is because I've had a lot of like not Silent Hill 2 dreams, just dreams where my brain's just making up a scenario that I'm exploring through like a Silent Hill 2 looking camera and controls and stuff, and it's just me walking through places I've been. And sometimes I've had dreams that look exactly like this subway, and that was very surreal. and I made an extra save file right there just in case I ever want to boot the game up and walk around there. Frick. I mean, you play this game for the audiovisual experience. That is absolutely the most impressive thing about this. So, while I did find it a little bit easy here and there, and certain things could be fleshed out, which I'm sure they would have been if there was more time and money with this thing, it does end up being a little bit more on the casual side of things. It's not the most casual. It's somewhere in between that and the really challenging survival horror games. So again, it's a good stepping stone if that's where you are with these sorts of games. But even if you are a more experienced, I guess, survival horror veteran, I hate talking about it like this because I get comments being like, oh, my only criticism was that I'm too good at the game. I'm just trying to get across demographics, right? Because like certain people know how they respond to games, they know how familiar they are with each genre, and I'm just trying to do a decent job of getting people to know what they're getting into in regards of that, because that's something I think a lot about. If that's where you are, like myself, it's still hard to care, because it's still really fun, and it's one of the coolest looking things and sounding things I've ever played through, right? Like, I can criticize the difficulty all I want, but there's a reason I played through it 3 times in a freaking row. I get like that perfect sensation of being familiar with the game, and you can do it all faster because you know where all the items are. This has been the best version of that since I played through Fatal Frame 2 for the first time. What was that, like 5 years ago? I think 2019? Yeah. Best version of that I've played since playing Fatal Frame 2 then. The story is also really good. I was so blown away by how good the voice acting is.
Okay. Get to the underground. I can do that.
Everybody does an incredible job. It's very convincing. It doesn't feel like your typical canned voice acting. It's not trying to do like the B-movie on purpose thing either. It's just a real genuine stab at a good dramatic plot with dramatic acting, and they do a phenomenal job. Mika's a great character. She's got a lot of personality. She feels very human. She doesn't feel like she's just describing what's in front of her. She has an opinion about it, or it reminds her of something, or the way she talks about it. It says something about what she's been through. Though I do think there is a little bit too much of this. Like, half of the things you click on to see what she's thinking about, she's just complains about how dirty it is. Well, this bathtub's filthy. I'd never take a shower in this. It's like, I feel like there's a little bit too much of that, where like, I was clicking on a lot of things to see, like, I want to see what she thinks of this, like, little computer box thing, and she just goes, that's filthy disgusting. I think there's a little bit much of that, but I do still think the character writing and, again, the acting are both really, really good. And the story is really good overall, too. Like, you're going through these environments, and there's such a story told for the people that lived here. That is a big thing, is you're finding these signals of voices from the past, and you listen to conversations that happened in these apartments back when they were suffering not from the mold yet, but suffering from all the exploitation. You feel the decline, the, I don't know, economic decline, social decline, whatever decline of the city before the mold and biohazard stuff happened, and seeing it all unfold, getting across everything that happened around here some time ago. It's very melancholy, it's very sad, but it's very, very well done, and I had such a blast just trying to figure out as much of stuff that happened as I could. And I thought the final boss was like just okay, but I did love the ending. Now, there's 3 endings. There's there's 2 main endings, and then there's like a 3rd secret ending. I like both of the endings. They get across a different thing. Like, the one that could be considered, I guess, the bad ending, you do see something nuts at the end of the credits that was like, wow, that's cool as hell. So even like the one that's not as good a conclusion to the character has, like, you get to see a really gargantuan thing of the world after that's really satisfying. And then of course the other ending is the better one for you, where you see like a, I don't know, something better for the character. I don't know if either or canon. They could both be canon, honestly. I feel like both things could just happen. The way it cuts, it's just really kind of adding or removing scenes, and I think all of them could have happened. But that 3rd secret ending, I'm not even going to spoil it. But I am... It's amazing that the dude put this in here. That made me laugh. I'll say how to get it. On hard mode, you got to beat the game with healing 3 times or less, and the first time where you have to heal as part of the tutorial, that counts. So you basically have 2 heals for the whole game, And if you beat it on hard mode, healing less than that or only that, then you get this secret ending, and it's pretty funny. Gave me a good chuckle. So if you're big into like beating Silent Hill over and over, and you're not gonna have like a super big trouble with this, like you can look forward to doing that run where you try to heal only twice. That was the most fun I had with this game, was trying to get through healing as little as possible. That is what I found the most challenging. So I really appreciate that there is an imposed challenge that does unlock something. And there's some post-game unlocks. There's a scissor blade, melee weapon. I think you get that for beating hard mode. Probably a reference to Clock Tower. It doesn't really look like the blade from Clock Tower. Although I guess there's a bunch of them. Probably looks like one of them. This thing packs a freaking punch, I tell you what. You also get big head mode. I haven't seen one of these since the N64. This is amazing. This looks really good too. I mean, like, this would look really uncanny if this was like a detailed, realistic graphics game. But when you go for that simple PS2 look, you can just make your head bigger and it's like, yeah, video game character, big video game head. It doesn't look uncanny, it just looks funny. This is great. But the coolest one is the dungeon crawler mode, yo. So remember when I said I wish you could get a better look at all these environments and stuff? Yeah, those are red herring, buddy. I know you commented being like, yeah, well, actually, when you beat the game, you can't. Yeah, I baited you, didn't I? Yeah, I learned from that Glover video. I know how to make people do that. Ha! But either way, yeah, no, I wanted to kind of unveil this at this part of the video because it is so freaking cool. You can play the entire game in first person, and not only do you get a more close-up view of all the textures and the environments, and you can really appreciate them from a whole new angle that you didn't really get to the first playthrough, but it also completely reinvents the way you play the game. You do have to use tank controls in first person, but it feels almost like that mechanicalness that came with the original Resident Evil 4. Like, one step back, two step backs, that is a deliberate action because you can't just move out of the way. If you want a real difficult, like actually kind of more challenging version of this, play it in first person. It's a whole different thing. It's so unbelievably cool. When I did my third playthrough, again, the challenging one where I had the most fun, for half of the game I played in first person. It really dials it back to that old school challenging kind of clunk that I loved from the original Silent Hill games and Resident Evil games. That yeah, if that's more your speed, and that's more what you're looking for, and you do find this game a little bit easy on your first playthrough, you can at least change it to this and probably have a much more challenging time on your next playthrough. And I love the way the gun looks. It doesn't look like this perfect at the bottom right, like I'm the first person shooter gun doing these impossible animations that you wouldn't really be seeing. It looks like she's just actually aiming from her own view. It just feels so natural. But yeah, I guess that's all my thoughts and feelings, some criticism, some honest to God criticism. I kind of feel bad about bringing a lot of stuff up because again, I know Nathan would do it if he had the time and budget, but like all things considered, this getting made under those restrictions by one person, that's nuts. That is nuts. I guess I just don't want people to go into it like with too high expectations, like expecting this like masterpiece Silent Hill 2 spiritual successor. It really isn't that. It is just a small game that takes a lot of influence from that. I know he does plan on adding some stuff post-launch. I don't know if it'll be like gameplay tweaks as much as it'll probably just be more content, more stuff in the game. But if you are playing it a while after this video came out, hopefully there's even more cool stuff that I wasn't able to bring up. If I could just make one real suggestion though, not to tell people how to make their games, but I do think this would be easy to do, and I do really think it would make the controls a lot easier for most people playing. Make the run button also a throttle button. I mean, the tank controls already do that. I was surprised to swap eventually just to see that the control style that kind of needs it more didn't have it. But at the end of the day, like what it's going for, it nails so freaking well that it's still absolutely worth playing for all types of fans of horror games, experienced and newer to the genre. So yeah, check out Hollowbody. It's $20 on Steam. It's only on Steam right now. I don't know if it's going to come to consoles. I would imagine they'll probably get it on PS5 at least at some point. I don't know about Switch, but yeah, check it out. I'd say it's like perfect price for the length it is. Like it's I'd say a 6-hour game, maybe the first playthrough. That, you know, your typical survival horror length, but as you get more familiar with it and replay it, very replayable. But you can also just plow through it in as little as 2 hours. The more familiar you get with it, so yeah, you will get a lot out of it. Yeah, check out Hollowbody. I freaking love this thing, even if it is kind of simple. Starting off the Halloween season right with a Nitro Ramble about a horror game. Hope you enjoyed the spooky talkings about a spooky video game. Hope it doesn't eat ya. Hope you don't die. I was like trying to do an evil laugh, that was just noise.